Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and you're listening to The Business of Content, a podcast about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. In this week's episode, we're talking about a BuzzFeed-like site that's become a cultural powerhouse in Nigeria. Daniel Arubo had no intention of becoming a media personality when he graduated with an engineering degree in 2013, but his funny tweets just happened to catch the eye of a Nigerian publishing executive who planned to launch a BuzzFeed-like website called Zikoko. Daniel started out as a senior writer, crafting humorous listicles like the 12 characteristics of Nigerian mothers, but over the next half-decade, he helped transform Zikoko into a cultural force that's willing to discuss hot-button issues around sexuality, the kind of issues that are typically considered taboo in conservative Nigeria. Daniel is now the editor-in-chief of Zikoko, and we recently sat down to discuss how the website found its audience and why it expanded beyond funny memes so it could tackle controversial topics. Before we jump into the interview, I want to talk about my Substack newsletter. Longtime listeners of this podcast know it carries no advertising. Whatever support it gets comes solely from those who subscribe to my Substack. So if you value the work I do here and benefit from the insights my interviews deliver, consider becoming a subscriber. Go to simonowens.substack.com. That's simonowens.substack.com. Okay, on to my interview with Daniel. Hey, Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for having me.
So you never had an intention of going into journalism, right? So kind of talk, I just want to get a sense of how you ended up joining this site. Like you had like a very clever Twitter account and then someone from a site called Zikoko reached out to you, right?
Yes, that's kind of the story. The site didn't really exist when they reached out to me. It was just, oh, you have really funny tweets. It was me and my best friend, Odunayo. So you guys have really funny tweets, come and create something with us. And that's they only had a name. They didn't really have like a direction. And yeah, we kind of did it together. And no, I had no intention of working in journalism. I studied computer engineering. But my friend and I, we had a blog in school where we used to write like random things. And I think that was my first proper introduction into writing, but journalism was never in the plan. Just kind of happened.
And what kind of tweets were you doing? Like, was it like just joking about current events or just kind of weird stand-up comedy, like one-liners? Like, what were you kind of producing?
I'm trying to think of myself in 2015. I was definitely trying to be funny. It was just, it was kind of what, like I was young, I wanted to retweet, so I would crack jokes about like lifestyle and dating and just like the Nigerian reality. And it wasn't, I don't think it was like stand-up comedy worthy, but I think it was funny. I got a couple of retweets and I got a couple followers and yeah, that was kind of it.
And were you in college or you were just out of college?
I was just out of college, yeah.
Uh-huh. And so who is this person who reached out to you and talked about this site that he wanted to found?
Okay, yeah, he's the founder of, it's called Big Cabal Media. His name is Shay Taylor. So he's the founder of Big Cabal Media. Under Big Cabal Media, there is Zikoko and there's Tech Cabal, a tech publication. Yeah, so Tech Cabal was kind of already successful. It was one of the most respected tech sites in Africa. But he wanted something else. He wanted something younger, funner, fresher. So that's kind of how Zikoko came to be. And he kind of just trusted us to figure out what we were doing. So we came up with like the kind of formats we wanted to try. We tried listicles and we tried quizzes and they did really well. So we kind of just ran with that for a couple of months. Yeah.
And was his pitch, he wanted to hire you like on a full-time basis to be like editor or just a writer, or like what was kind of the pitch to you?
It was like just right. We had an editor in chief. She didn't stay too long before she left, but I was hired to just be a writer, kind of like the head writer. And yeah, so that was kind of the pitch. I didn't want to be the editor. I didn't want to be in charge of anything because I had a fear of like managing other people. But yeah, I was just meant to be a writer.
So you had this engineering degree. How did you feel about this like turn that you weren't expecting? Like, were you happy that this was where your career was going?
I wasn't I don't know how to explain why I wasn't happy, but it was like, okay, in Nigeria, computer engineering degree is like 5 years. So I was like, why didn't I just study like journalism actually? So there was the imposter syndrome part of me that was like, you don't, how can you be doing this? You don't know what you're doing. A couple of tweets is not enough to be a writer, and you're not really that funny. So it was just a lot of that with myself. But I don't think I would have used the degree either way. I probably would have found a different job because halfway in, I realized computer engineering wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So I wasn't in love with it. Yeah.
But do you think that background was helpful in terms of like, running kind of like a new digital website, like even if you weren't building it or something, like understanding the technical aspects? Did you feel like that helped you in terms of being kind of like a media entrepreneur?
Not even a little bit. It didn't help at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So in those early days, you said that like it was just kind of listicles and stuff like that. So how long did it take? What were the listicles like? What's an example? And when did you start noticing that the site was starting to kind of take off?
Okay, so I remember we started with like 15 things you relate to if you have a Nigerian mother, if you went to a Nigerian university, just stuff like that, like light stuff. But I remember the first listicle we did that actually went viral. It was like there are lots of like random church posters around Lagos, like just like they're so weird, they almost feel satirical. So I did a post where I compiled like 35 of them of like the weirdest church posters that you wouldn't believe are real, and it did like 100,000 views in like a week. And so we were like, oh, I guess Nigerians want random funny things. And we kind of just like built it from there. People knew the site. A lot of people discovered the site really quickly. And so there were a lot of people saying, oh, I read Zikoko on my way back from work while I'm in the bus. I'm just like on Zikoko reading everything you guys put out. And yeah, it happened pretty quickly. I think just because it was,
And
yeah.
and where was the audience coming from? Like, was it Facebook?
Yeah, it was Facebook. It was mostly Facebook. It was and it was Nigerians, not just in Nigeria, but Nigerians in diaspora as well. Like that was really big. A lot of people in the UK, US said it was kind of like it reminded them of home. And I guess that was like the big attraction. And Facebook really Facebook wasn't as stiff as it is now when it comes to like pushing content organically. So we weren't even really promoting that aggressively, but it was moving. Like people were reading it and people were finding it. Yeah.
And so you eventually though left the company, right? Where did you go and why did you leave?
Okay, after like a year of doing listicles and doing quizzes, I kind of got bored. My editor in chief at the time, Damilola Dufua, she was great. She wanted to do more. She wanted us to like expand and do more long form articles, and I agreed. Wanted us to do more videos, but I guess what we were doing at the time was working, and we didn't like it was rare for something like that to be working. So I guess people didn't want to like switch it up too much. And I mean, I was like, fair enough, but I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can sit down every single day and be funny on like command. So I decided to leave for a French company that just decided to move to Nigeria. It's called Combini. So I followed my editor in chief at the time of Zikoko to Combini as the head writer. And I kind of worked there for 3 years, went from head writer to senior editor to editor in chief. And then I left.
Yeah, and you eventually came back, right?
Yeah, I came back. That was kind of like while I was still at Combini, I was like noticing that Zikoko had started implementing all the things that we talked about when I was still there. Like I was seeing more long form pieces, more creative videos, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the Zikoko I always wanted. Like yes, the funny listicles are still there, but like it's a bit more, and people were like engaging with it in different ways because it was kind of like the people that liked Zikoko when I was there had kind of grown up and they wanted a bit more from their content, and that's why I felt comfortable joining again. Yeah.
And when you came back, did you come back as a writer or was that when you were immediately coming back as editor in chief?
No, I came back as senior editor.
Uh-huh.
So it was kind of like because I was kind of the head writer and I kind of created most of the concepts at the original Zikoko. I was hired as the editor in chief at the time called it a creative force. Like he just wanted me to like inspire people to kind of go beyond what they've been creating. And so I tried to come up with a few more ideas, formats to try. And my managing editor at the time, both of us came up with a new series about sex and sexuality, and that became a very big hit. So we kind of got inspired to like do more, and we kind of got a feel for what Nigerians wanted from us, and we just kind of leaned into that. Yeah.
So tell me about that. Like you created this series and it uses like crowdsourcing, right? Like where you put out a question, some kind of theme, and then people will send in like interesting answers of their own personal experiences, and then you'll kind of curate those, right?
Okay, yeah, that's a different kind of format. Like, yes, we have that. It's like we call it a human interest story. So yes, we'll pick a theme and say, okay, we want to talk to Nigerians who like had abortions, for example, and what that experience was like. Of course, it's going to be anonymous because it's illegal in Nigeria. So people sending their answers, and we curate it and like post it. But for the series I'm talking about, Sex Life, that one is like more focused on just one person. So we'll pick up. We had like a form where people just email us, "Oh, I would like to share my story. I think my sex life is interesting," and so it's just be a one-on-one interview that lasts for about 3 hours, and we kind of like distill it into like a 2,000 word article, just asking, like, kind of like curating the person's sex life from the beginning, from their first ever sexual experience to where they are right now. And it's a diverse series. We've talked to non-binary people, trans people, queer people, and I think that's what people really connected with in the series. That it wasn't about sex, more about how people engage with sex and sexuality. Yeah.
And so you allow a lot of this stuff like to be submitted anonymously. How do people submit the stuff?
Yeah, it depends on how intense it is. For Sex Life, I haven't done an anonymous story. Like, I've always known the people I've interviewed. But for the other ones, we use Outspoken. It's an app where you pick a fake name and people just chat with you. And like, so if it's like if you've had an abortion, like 7 Nigerians talk about getting an abortion, it's a bit shorter, so there's a bit more space to play around with that, so people can use text, and they just text and say their story, and the writer edits it and works with that. But for a series like Sex Life, which is a bit more personal, I kind of don't want to. I never really do it over text. I kind of want to talk to you over the phone or over Zoom, or like maybe WhatsApp. The best I can do is WhatsApp when you send in voice notes. I want people to speak, because I realize that people are a bit more, unless you're a writer professionally, people are a bit more restricted over text. So I prefer to talk to them. Yeah.
And can you talk about like how Zikoko fits within the culture of Nigeria? Like I think you described it as a very conservative country.
Yes. We call Zikoko, the tagline that our boss came up with is "We are the culture," and yes, I think that's kind of where we fit. A lot of people have said that Zikoko tells it as it is. Like, it's like people might disagree with like the lifestyle of the story we're telling, but they can't deny that it's someone's life. Like, homophobes read the article, and the best you can do is get angry, but you've learned something. You've been able to see someone's humanity, and that's kind of what Zikoko does. So it's the stories that people never want to talk about. Nigerians don't like talking about sex, but they're really obsessed with sex. There was like a Pornhub survey that came out a few years ago that said like Nigerians were like at the top when it came to Googling gay porn, and all Nigerians were really pissed and like, no, that's not true. But it's like, it's clearly true. Like, Pornhub isn't gonna lie, but it's just like we're really repressed. So the stories are plentiful. It's just we're finally telling it honestly and just like putting it out there. Yeah.
And is like Zikoko, is it like known as the outlet that is like getting out stories that a lot of more conservative Nigerian news outlets won't cover?
Yes, definitely. We definitely get that a lot. Like Zikoko is doing. There's something that our readers like to say, that Zikoko is doing the Lord's work, and it's very heartwarming to get that kind of feedback, because it is when people talk about certain stories in Nigeria, there's kind of like a push to sensationalize it, or like kind of push a negative agenda. For us, there isn't any agenda. It's just to tell the story the way it is. Like, we're not going to shroud it in our personal biases. We're just going to give you space to talk and be honest and to talk about your experiences. Even if it's not something we might fully agree with, we're still going to tell your story. Yeah.
And has the conservatism of the country, has it created any problems for you as an editor? Do you get death threats? Do prominent politicians like condemn you? Like, what is the impact on you personally and on the publication?
I mean, I've gotten a few messages on Facebook and on Twitter about trying to push the gay agenda and how I'm going to go to hell. But it isn't like I don't feel unsafe. Because weirdly enough, the it's a conservative country, but I feel like the because of the way, I think maybe it's because of the way it's written or the way the story, like it's very human. Like it isn't like a think piece about why you shouldn't be homophobic. It's literally just telling the story of how a queer man was bullied throughout high school, how it affected his life, how he just wants to be happy and feel loved. Like unless your heart is made of like stone, it's probably going to tug at some heartstrings. So I feel like it doesn't get that intense amount of backlash. And when it comes to like politics, we haven't had anything particularly serious. Like we haven't had pushback from politicians or the government yet.
Can you talk about like, do you have anything that's been like really high impact storytelling, like that, like got a lot of, kind of broke out of the usual circle and maybe had people talking about it on TV? Like, what are some of the things that have been really impactful that you guys have published over the last few years?
Okay. For example, there were the NSAS protest, and we were among the few publications that were covering it, like covering it and covering it honestly. So there was a lot of like we got a lot of love for that because we kind of like paused all other content creation and we're like just focusing on reporting about the protests and how people could help, where the protests were happening, and how you could donate to help. So yeah, people that got that went pretty far and gave us a lot of love and like credibility because a lot of publications were just ignoring it or they were straight up lying about it. Um, but yeah, so that was really good. Also had a piece about boys being sexually abused in Nigeria and how people don't really talk about that. The article did really well. I mean, it really sparked conversation. Yeah, it's just things like that. Typically, I think like at least twice a week or once a week, there's an article we put out that sparks like that trends on Twitter that sparks a conversation and people are talking about it. So that's been great. Yeah.
And is most your traffic still coming from Facebook?
Not anymore. It's mostly Twitter now. Um, and there's a lot of like direct traffic. So people on Twitter engage with the piece, then they share it to like WhatsApp groups and share it to their friends, and it just kind of like spreads from there. But before it was Facebook that used to do that. But Facebook doesn't really, things rarely move on Facebook anymore unless you like aggressively promote it. And we're not trying to spend too much money.
So in the US, media companies, they have a lot of growing mistrust of the major platforms like Facebook and Google, and to a certain extent, a lesser extent, Twitter. You see them really doubling down on newsletters. Do you have that same sort of mistrust, or are there ways that you're trying to diversify your traffic sources?
Yeah, we have a newsletter and we're like pushing it. We're trying to like revamp it and push it aggressively because we realized that it was a very big it's a big source. So we're trying to make it more engaging. Like right now, the way it's set up is like we just kind of like it's a recap of the best stories that came out the day before. But now we want to make it a bit more human, a bit more engaging, so people can connect with it. Because I personally, I do not trust Facebook. I don't think it has like unless you're paying, I don't think it's has organized like publishing's best interest at heart. Twitter, on the other hand, is just very out there. Like it's just whatever you put, if people like it, people are gonna see it, people are gonna share it, and nothing is blocking that from happening. But with Facebook, it just feels like you post something that would have gone viral like maybe 3 years ago and like zero, we get nothing. Yeah, so we're trying our best to focus on newsletters and just trying to find alternative forms of generating traffic because what we're trying to do right now, I don't know how we're going to do it, is like find a way to engage with WhatsApp in a more meaningful way because we realize that articles that go viral on Zikoko have to go viral on WhatsApp. Like they have to jump from WhatsApp groups to WhatsApp groups, and that's how like the numbers get great. But we are not in control of that. It has to be a reader that decides to drop it. So we're trying to find a way to be a bit more in control of that pipeline. Yeah.
Huh, interesting. I didn't know you could see WhatsApp traffic in your Google Analytics
Yeah.
because I thought that was dark social traffic.
Oh yeah. It kind of shows up as direct. So
Oh, okay.
you kind of like infer because like quizzes, for example, I know there's a quiz that I made and my mom sent it to me, said, oh, she got it in 2 different WhatsApp groups that she's in. I was like, okay. So when I checked, I was like mostly direct traffic. So I kind of just put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so how many people approximately do you have on staff?
For Zikoko, let's say about 15. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And you guys are mostly text-based. Like, I don't think you have podcasts. I did notice you have a YouTube channel. It seems like it's still kind of small. What's your strategy with video? Is that still new?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure that out. We kind of like have a plan to do more shows and do more, like we're trying to create, we want our videos to be a reflection of how our editorial looks. Our editorial is very light and snappy, and we've kind of figured that out. We're just trying to figure out our videos. So we have videos that we plan on releasing. We have a bunch of series that we're working on. We even have documentaries that we're working on. Yeah, so we're definitely gonna pump up our YouTube space soon.
Yeah. So I know you don't work on the business side, but can you tell me a little bit about the business model for the site?
Yes. The business model right now, like we mostly make money from advertising. So from like branded quizzes, Instagram posts, branded listicles, even like newsletter sponsorships and like leaderboards on the sites, and like sponsorships of like particular series or articles. That's kind of the main way we make money. But since we want to make more money, we're trying to like move out of that, and we don't want most of our revenue to come from advertising. So we want to invest in like selling merch, because we have a very dedicated fan base, and we're like, so we even like we put out a tweet a few weeks ago. It's like, oh, if we made a Zikoko shirt, would you buy it? And our followers were like, of course. So we want to like do that. We want to sell videos in advance. Like the series we're currently working on, we're working on like a blind date series, and we have the pilot out. It's about to be done, and we want to just sell that and like and push it to people and like just buy it for like the entire season. Or the documentaries that we're working on. We're working on a Jollof Road documentary. A few of our writers went to different countries in West Africa, experienced the food, experienced the culture, came back with a lot of footage, and we're creating that into a tangible documentary that we will also sell. So yeah, that's how we're trying to make money.
I don't know what this current state of like streaming is in Nigeria, but like, do you get approached by like the Facebooks of the world, like Facebook Watch or Netflix or anybody like that to try to, work on a production deal, or is that not really in your wheelhouse?
We haven't gotten that, but we're gonna push for it. Like the documentary we're working on, we think it would be a great fit for Netflix. So if they don't come to us, we're gonna go to them. Yeah.
So you mentioned merch. It sounds like you want to do kind of like, logos on t-shirts and stuff like that. So I know like, obviously, when someone from your staff reached out to me, they kind of pitched you as like a BuzzFeed for Nigeria. BuzzFeed's getting really into like e-commerce and stuff like that. Have you guys experimented with e-commerce, affiliate ads, different stuff like that?
Not yet, but we're working on an app, and that's one of the things I'm hoping to be able to integrate into that. But yeah, for now, we haven't really utilized our audience as well as we would like, but we're planning to change that this year. We want to see, like, Zikoko fans are always down for the cause. They're always down to donate. Like, whenever we write an article about someone in need, our readers are always ready to donate money to the person. They're always ready to donate money to us. So we want to see how far that love stretches. So yeah.
And like for the advertising, when you're doing like sponsored content, is it mainly like Nigerian businesses?
Yes, mostly. Yeah.
Cool. So as editor, what would you like to invest more in the future? Like, would you want to, I know you don't do like traditional journalism. Would you like to get into that? Would you like to launch podcasts, build a subscription paywall? Like if you had like a sudden infusion of investment or revenue that you could spend, how would you go about that?
Yeah, definitely. For me, it would be expanding the way we tell stories. Right now, our editorial is really strong, but there's so many stories we've done where people have said, like, if this was like a short film, I would watch it. If this was a series, we would watch it. So we have Love Life. It's a series that's kind of like modern love, and it's like our best performing series, basically. And I would love a future where we can adapt that into a series. Like that would be amazing. Or we could have a podcast that like we're definitely working on that. So if there was like a sudden inflow of money, it would be looking for alternative ways to tell stories. Like I think editorially we've kind of like figured it out. I think I would love to see that energy kind of like spread across onto the love, like video and podcasts, like video, audio, just different ways to tell stories. We're even having a conversation about even like maybe printing a book of the best Zikoko stories and just like pushing that out. So yeah, but I don't think.
How much are you? Oh, sorry, keep on going.
Yes, but I don't think we'll like ever do a paywall. I've been like, I know the conversation has come up a few times, but like I'm deeply against that. But we do have a feature to donate at the end of every article on Zikoko. So, and people have been donating. So,
like one-time donations type of thing.
There's one-time donations. You can have like you could promise to donate for like 10 months. Yeah, it's up to the person. Yeah.
How much do you look at U.S. media companies like BuzzFeed and others when kind of coming up with strategy ideas? Like, how much are you kind of aware of what's going on in the U.S. media space?
Yeah, we study it a lot. Like my CEO is like the biggest. His name is Tomiwa Aladekomo. He's like the biggest media nerd I've ever met. So he knows everything that's happening and he's always in touch with what's happening. But we kind of like, we study it, but with the realization that Nigerians are very different. Like Nigerians are very special, and the kind of things that would work for like, say, Americans and BuzzFeed is just not going to work for Nigerians. So we try our best to kind of adapt, and like the things that we think are cool, we'll experiment with it, but like there's some things that I just think it's dead on arrival. Nigerians are not going to react to this in a positive way, no matter how much they like you. Like the paywall one, for example, I think people really like Zikoko, but I think if they suddenly had to pay, readership would decline drastically. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Daniel. Well, those were all the questions I had for you. Where can people find you online?
My handle is at nerdefiko, NERDEIFIKO. And for Zikoko, it's at Zikoko Mag, ZIKOKOMAG.
Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Okay, thanks for joining us. I'm actually on the lookout for new guests for this podcast. So if you do interesting stuff in digital content, whether you're a full-time YouTuber, a media executive, or run a cool niche newsletter, definitely reach out. My email address is simonowens@gmail.com. Okay, see you next week.